Hello and welcome to the presentation profiling of C++ applications with AQtime and C++ Builder. My name is Goran Begic and I'm with SmartBear Software, the makers of AQtime and Test Complete. So I'm in product marketing, but I'm going to talk about the activity of performance profiling. Clearly for illustration I will use AQtime, but the main point of this presentation is something else, and I'll get into that in a moment. So I've spent over 15 years in the industry working on software development projects with customers of our tools, and I want to share some of that experience with you. So I've been with Rational Software, I've been with IBM, MathWorks, and now more recently with SmartBear Software. You can always reach me via email or via Twitter, and here's my Twitter name, GBEGICW. So one thing I'd just like to mention before going into the presentation. So I gave a similar talk at the CodeRage, Delphi leg of the CodeRage conference, and I didn't put enough emphasis on the context and the problem described in this presentation. So one thing I will not try to do is try to teach you or anybody else how to do performance profiling. That's not the point here. I want to attack a somewhat different problem. So in general, when we talk about software performance, it's something we experience when things get to run slow. That's when we start noticing, wow, that maybe there is a problem. Why is it so slow? And at this point, often we go and resort to performance profiling as the root cause analysis. The thing is that when application runs slow, that performance is a symptom. It's not necessarily the root cause of the problem. In fact, more likely the root cause is somewhere else. And this is the part I'd like to focus on today. Finding out the root cause, and there are 5 suggestions in this presentation on how you can sort of start looking into going directly to some known typical performance root causes by using a performance profiling tool. One important thing is, through various different projects on different profilers, one thing I learned, and what's very common, is that while we often think about performance profiling as something that will help us identify the location of that one particular problem that we are experiencing, it's also an activity that frequently helps us discover something we didn't anticipate. That may be the root cause of the problem, but sometimes we look into the traces and we scratch our heads and ask the question of why is this happening? Maybe it's not even related to the performance problem. And I cannot tell you how many times something like that happened. Every time we would go and deploy the tool and start doing profiling, something will show up and we will start looking into this. And this is really the basis for this presentation, that the fact that we discover something we didn't anticipate. So to warm up, let's start RAD Studio XE3 and AQtime and take a look at a very basic action, the first step into performance profiling of just finding out the slowest function. As said, this is just the first step. There are many more advanced things you can do, and I'm not going to take that route in this presentation. But after the intro and overview of AQtime, we will go into these very 5 specific things you can do to learn about the application. So let's start RAD Studio. I have a very basic demo. I think it's part of the standard set of sample applications, and you can do some graphical editing with it. AQtime is, you can find AQtime on the top menu, and you can, for example, select the type of profiling you want to do. You can AQtime is also integrated into the RAD Studio view, so you can, for example, manage different performance runs in AQtime Explorer. The way you use AQtime is after you build your application, it's important to have debug information there. Otherwise, the tool won't be able to resolve the function names and lines of code. You can run the application with the profiler attached. And since this is a graphical editing program, we are going to use it. Clearly, the use case you decide to do is related to the performance analysis you're doing. You cannot just run any use case. You need to run a very specific use case, and for that use case then observe the performance data. At the end of the run, the performance profiler is going to sort of allow you to look at timings that were recorded, and typically you start at the function level. You can look at the time here, or you can look at it in the summary report. And the summary report is something you can automate. It can give you, for example, the worst performance of the functions with their children. So you can see where the time is spent. And typically this is where you would start the analysis into the bottlenecks of your application. We looked at the integration with RAD Studio. I'd like to go into the tips and then give you some additional information on how to set up AQtime for profiling, and just mention other topics beyond client-side performance. So everything that we are going to show here today is related to the native application or a script running locally on the client machine. Clearly there are some other methods to use and some other tools to use when dealing with, for example, web services that have been deployed or web applications that are running on the application server. And I will not go into those types of performance analysis today, but I do want to mention some additional topics that you can pursue following this talk. You've seen the integration in the RAD Studio, so you can over here on the screenshot you can also see some additional details that are available when you do performance profiling, and you look at the report with functions, you can go into the source code or look at the details of the function. Now, where would you use that? How would you use all these different views and information that the performance profiler gives you that goes beyond function list? So the first thing to look into beyond timings is the number of calls. One reason for that is, well, sometimes some performance bottlenecks don't show up on the top 10 list of slowest functions. You may have some functions that simply take a certain amount of time, but you can maybe improve performance locally. And one very helpful thing is to examine loops, expensive calls. Sometimes functions, either due to some troubleshooting, are called within a loop, and they can be pretty intensive in terms of time, and you can discover them easily if you look at the number of calls. So you may say, okay, but when I'm looking at time, I'm going to get the hit count as well, which is true, but number of calls is something you can also do when you do code coverage profiling. And code coverage is something that will tell you what was run and how many times, and more importantly, what you still didn't test. And an interesting thing about code coverage, which I'd like to suggest, is like if you have automated tests set up, it's very easy to attach AQtime to these automated functional tests and collect code excuse me, and collect code coverage as for your functional tests, for your automated tests. And that way you actually don't have to spend time in doing some manual analysis, you can look at the reports that are created during automated testing and look at the test cases and the number of calls and try to correlate the two. The way you would use code coverage in AQtime is very similar. You select a coverage profiler as the current profiler to use. You run AQtime. Again, we are going to go and do our little use case. And at the end, coverage is not going to show you times that are recorded, but it's going to tell you the number of hits that the particular function has taken. For example, over here. And then you can also see on the lines of code how many times a particular call was made. And that's really the basis for this slice of performance analysis, is the number of calls. Clearly, code coverage can also give you other benefits. You can look at how much of your application you have tested with your test cases, but again, looking at the hit count can also be very revealing. All right, tip number 2, excessive object allocation. Again, performance is a symptom of a different problem, especially if you work with managed applications. This can be an important thing to look at. In case of C++, you can have memory leaks, which is something that the tool will report at the end of the run. But you can also look at how much memory, how many objects you have in memory, and how much memory do they take as you run the application. So you could say that too much of a good thing, too much of dynamic allocation may not be so great at a given point of time, and it can impact your performance. And so that's a great thing to look into when you deal with a profiler. You have this capability of looking at the objects that are dynamically allocated on the heap, and A, look for memory leaks, and B, see if you can maybe reduce the size of the memory that is being used. And in terms of product usage or profiler usage, when we do allocation profiling, so this is the type of profiler that you would use with AQtime. It would be allocation profiler. It's third on the list. You would still run your use case as you do. And one thing I'd like to suggest here is that unlike with performance profiling, where you accumulate time for the duration of the use case, although it's applicable there as well, you can clear data, clear results. What this means is that, for example, during initialization of the application, you really don't care whether it performs properly. Let's say this is not the segment of the application run that you care about. You just want to, for example, look at the usage of the editing functions. You can clear the results. Everything that AQtime has collected so far has been deleted, and it starts new. And then we go and we run our test. And at this point, you can get results. So take the snapshot of everything that's in memory, and then look at the objects that have been allocated, and you can look at the classes that have been used to instantiate these objects, and look at the amount of data you have created at this point of time. You can take multiple snapshots and really sort of slice and dice how your application uses memory as you go through your use cases. This is helpful to learn about the application, and of course, when you know that you have a memory problem, this can allow you to step by step to come to the root cause. All right. And again, at the end of the run, the application is going to take a final snapshot, and if there are objects still left in memory, there are likely to be memory leaks. So this is something you want to look into. All right. Tip number 3. So especially when you work with Windows application, in addition to memory allocated on the heap, you also use Windows resources, and if you don't release them, that can also sort of clog the memory and slow the application down, especially if you work on a large project with multiple people contributing the code at the same time. You may, over time, long period of time, but still the application can gain weight, and the question is, okay, where is this handle? Who is using this particular resource, and what resources are in use? So with AQtime you can monitor the use of Windows resources. This feature, unlike the 2 previous ones I showed you, is part of the Pro version. And this is very similar to the checking of dynamic memory allocation. You can take a snapshot at a particular point of time and look at what are the Windows resources that are in use by the application. So by now you get the picture. You can select the right profiler, run with profile. You can select which type of resources you want to monitor. So you have different options over here. Thread model is really how you want to sort them out at the results. And when you take a snapshot, you can see exactly which bitmaps and fonts and all the other Windows resources are being used. So this can be very, very handy as well. All right. And then again at the end you can see which handles were still active when the application was when the heap was destroyed. A very common source of performance bottlenecks is connection with the database, as well as any third-party calls. This is something that happens inadvertently, or you simply have to live with it, depending on the system that you're dealing with. But one thing I'd like to suggest here is that you can very easily monitor the calls by looking at the performance on the line of code. So let's just go and select our performance profiler, go back to performance profiling. Again, I believe that looking at the line level profile in the source code is a feature of AQtime Pro. I'm going to open another project, which in this case is going to be a sample that comes with AQtime Pro, and it is located, so when you install AQtime, under users, public documents, AQtime samples. So here is our Explorer. Our project is loaded, and I want to run AQtime. Alright. So here this demo applications really just executes a couple of queries, and it will allow us to look into the timings on the line level. Again, it's important to mention that debug information is necessary for this report. So you can see here, when you sort these the information, you can then look at the details of a particular function and go to the line where the call was made, and then see exactly how much time was taken to execute this particular call. What this means is that when these instructions get to be executed, everything that was called from it is going to be added to the time, to the counter of time for this function, and then the result is going to be displayed, overlaid with the source code, so you can see what SQL statements were executed in this particular function call and how much time they took. If you have third-party calls, if you have SQL calls, you can easily monitor how much time they've taken by looking at the annotated source, like shown here in this example. And then final tip is when you deal with the Visual Component Library, or in general in any other part of your application, you can reduce the footprint of the application and improve performance potentially by looking at the unused code. This code can be discovered during code coverage, or you can use a special profiler for VCL units that will give you an overview of the libraries that you don't need in your application, so you can remove them. And again, a very, very straightforward way of using it in AQtime is by selecting Unused VCL Units Profiler and performing the analysis and getting a list of files that you can remove from your project. So just to summarize, as I was going through the 5 tips, we looked at different aspects of the product functionality, and we also looked at different ways sort of to look into specific potential root causes of performance problems that you may be experiencing. We looked at excessive function calls, excessive object allocation, including Windows resources, bottlenecks in SQL statements and third-party calls, and any unused code that you may have in your application. Important to mention, so if let's say you said, okay, that's great, I have AQtime, I have RAD Studio installed, I'd like to give it a shot. When you prepare your project for the run, make sure you build with debug, and that means you need to have debug information when you compile, and you need to link with debug. Select the option to get debug line number information. It's going to be very helpful if you go into the line of code. Disable code guard and use standard stack frames. So these are some of the suggestions that you can use in order to set up your project for analysis. And important, if you have a COM server, don't forget to register the debug version when you run your test, because that's the one that's going to be loaded in memory. Otherwise you won't get performance data. And as mentioned earlier, AQtime Standard is a free version. Pro has more capability. Here I mentioned one important thing is 64-bit support is not available at the moment for C++ applications. It's only available for Delphi. You can use this list. There is a very detailed form on the website that shows you what's different, but fundamentally performance, coverage, allocation, which are the 3 I would say most important analysis that you can do with your application, are all available in Standard. However, the number of modules you can analyze at one point of time is 5. With Pro you don't have this limitation. So beyond client-side performance, if you are building web applications, if you work with web services, you may want to look into some additional different tools specialized for this type of performance analysis. If you run automated tests, collecting performance data, at a minimum code coverage data is an excellent extension that increases the value of your automated tests. So AQtime has a lightweight coverage profiler that you can attach that will actually have a very small impact on the process of testing, and that you can use to actually have a starting point into the analysis. Web applications are testing performance of web applications is different because you may get different results when you put a load under your application. It may actually happen on a client side for some types of applications, but most of the time you don't have 500 users sitting in front of one machine. With a web application, you may actually have an increased number of users trying to perform certain actions, and you need to take that into consideration. Often it's that type of performance testing is called load testing or stress testing. Planning performance is something that is a very good practice. You would basically need to specify certain baselines for your project and start thinking about how you're going to reach the performance goals and monitor them through the life cycle of the application. And also you can automate the test setup and breakdown, and potentially even do some calls to AQtime automatically, for example, taking snapshots. So you can automate a lot of things by using the API. And of course, we at SmartBear, we appreciate our Embarcadero community. We have a lot of users coming from the Delphi and C++ builder world, and we want to sort of thank you for that and give you a special offer as attendees of this conference to get any of our testing tools, including Load Complete and Test Complete, and get 10% off because you have been an important part of our user community, and we really appreciate that. So thank you very much. If you have any questions or if you have comments, please contact me. My email is goran.begic@smartbear.com, or you can ping me on Twitter. I really enjoyed giving this presentation, and I hope it will give you some ideas on how you can use the profiler in the next project, or if you want to look into the AQtime Pro, you can always download a free trial. Thank you very much.
Can you use AQtime that is built into XE3 with 64-bit C++ applications?
Not at the moment. When exactly we are going to provide that capability is not quite clear yet, but we are working together with the Embarcadero development team to figure that out.
Okay, great. Let's see. Maybe you already had a slide about this, but what are the feature differences between the included AQtime and the upgrade AQtime, and what is the price?
Yeah, I think on one of the slides I showed you some of the functional differences between the two. If you go to smartbear.com, you can see the pricing as well. It's available on the product page. So if you go to products, and I think AQtime is listed under development tools. If you see AQtime Pro on the list below, actually you can see it on the page that you just opened.
Oh, I'm sorry. On this page? AQtime Pro, right here. It's under testing.
Oh, it is on testing. It is on testing,
okay.
Yeah. And so if you scroll down, there's a lot of things on that page, but you can see the pricing there as well. And so node-locked is $5.99.
Right. Okay, great. So that's on this link. I will put that in the as a response.
And also, I would like to encourage people if they look into AQtime Pro, if they have any type of feedback about the product and how we can improve it, I would appreciate that as well.
Okay, great. So does AQtime provide the same feature support for Delphi and C++ Builder, 32 and 64-bit Windows applications? The Pro edition now, since we already established that the bundled one isn't quite there yet as far as 64-bit.
On the C++ side, the Delphi on the Delphi side, we do support 64-bit.
Okay, sure. But is it the same features for both Delphi and C++ Builder?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. Great. So I'll put that in there. Okay. What version of Windows and Windows APIs does AQtime support?
So I think Windows 7, Professional, and Server, and we are working on Windows 8 update at the moment.
And you go back to Vista or anything like that as well, or?
I believe so. So I think if you see, actually, it's right in front of us, XP and Windows 7. If you go back, you can see that XP and Vista. I wasn't 100% sure about Vista, but yeah, it is included.
Yep. Windows Server 2008, Windows Server 2003, and Windows XP even. Cool. Is AQtime doing any profiling of the SQL database side, or only between code call and return?
We don't have a SQL profiler integrated in or available in AQtime. Nothing special. I think that one thing that like it definitely wouldn't look into the server side, and you can look at the profile of the SQL statement on the line level profile. So on the annotated source, probably that's the best time to look at the timing for the particular SQL statement.
Do you support FireMonkey C++?
We do.
Great. Can you profile a multi-tier application like the Delphi C++ DataSnap server and clients, and also profile code in DLLs?
Yes, we can. Some preparation is required for that to work. In the help, you can find instructions on how to approach that client-server applications and also DLLs.
Okay, great. Do you have any IQ and OQ documents for Test Complete or AQtime?
I'm not sure what that would be. I'm sorry.
Okay, so Jared, maybe if you want to clarify what IQ and OQ stands for.
Yeah.
And then we can ask that again. There's another question here. Well, it's a duplicate really. When will you have C++ Builder 64-bit compiler support, and will it be a free upgrade? But you're working with Embarcadero about that, so maybe you're not ready to.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what the date is. We are on. We have quarterly releases, so every 3 months we release an update, so it would fit into one of the cycles.
Okay. Great. So while Jared maybe is working on rephrasing his question, anything you want to add to the presentation today?
No. It's just we are very happy to be to participate at CodeRage, and just want to thank you, Anders, and everybody for organizing the event.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much, and thank you for being part of it, and thank you for supporting C++ Builder and Delphi and FireMonkey and VCL and all that kind of stuff. So it's all great.
Yeah, thanks everybody on the call.
All right. Let's see. One more thing. Do you profile assembler, inline assembler?
No.
No. Okay. Oh, looks like Jared is clarifying his question here. Installation qualification and operational qualification validation documents. We have to validate to FDA standards, and that is IQ, OQ, and PQ. Just wondering if you have any of those documents for test complete and or AQtime.
So the question is not necessarily about profiling installation. The question is about documentation that is required for adoption of the tool in the approved process. Is that?
That's what
I guess. Yeah. I think that I don't know the answer to that question, but I can definitely look into this. And I don't know exactly how to get back in touch.
I can send him your email address. What was it? It was.
GB, it's first name dot last name at smartbear.com.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'll look into this.
Okay, so I will send that to him, and he can send you directly my question. Do you do? You don't do Macintosh profiling at all. You just do support Windows, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you have any plans? Is there on the roadmap to do Mac OS 10 by any chance?
Not at the moment.
Well, again, thank you very much for this presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.